Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor, back at my usual setup, and like in many other occasions before, I have a special guest with me. Special guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Carolyn Stearns, and I live in Connecticut in the USA.
Okay. Now, Carolyn, before we go any deeper into your into your books or into your bibliography, I have to say I don't exactly know what your books contain, and therefore cannot exactly predict what kind of reaction it will have. So, before we go delve any further, is there any topic you do not want to discuss over the course of this interview?
Um, I can't think of one that might come up in regards to my books, so my books are all family friendly,
Okay, even the spooky ones.
even the spooky ones,
Okay, good.
within reason.
Yeah. So well then, I guess we start our discussion with the spooky ones because I've heard you have one coming pretty soon.
It's coming real soon. It's kind of at that panic button point, like got to get all the last minute things, and
Yeah. Uh, now I have to ask: do you still would you say all of your stages still hit that? Okay, not I said that wrongly. I'll rephrase that. Would you say that all of your works have at some point really reached that panic button stage, or do you still feel like there is a panic button stage?
yeah, and I'm not, I know it's all doable and it'll get done. It's just, life's busy and you juggle a lot of things. And I would love to just work on my books full time, but that's not the option. So um, it's always good to, I think that pumps the adrenaline up. It helps push that project forward a little bit and makes you do a better job when you're got that feeling that I got to do this, I got to get it done, get it done right. So I don't think it's all a bad thing. And I think it's part of the excitement of publishing a new book and a part of the, it's the roller coaster ride when you're inching up the hill.
Okay. Now, uh, does your bibliography consist entirely of books or of long form fiction, or have you also written shorter stories or poetry or anything like that?
So I've done a long time ago, I did a little bit of poetry. My first publication was just a short story, but it was also a performance piece, as I'm a performing storyteller in the oral narrative tradition. And it's a Christmas piece, and people kept saying, "Oh, I just wish I could take it home and savor the story after, it's an hour performance." And they kept urging me to print a print copy. And so it was really a takeaway to sell at those performances, but it stays out there. It's called Christmas Spirits. It's a little bit spooky in a way. So the little bit of that touch on it. And it's the backstory to Clement Clark Moore, who wrote "'Twas the Night Before Christmas."
Oh,
Then my first novel uh, is a historical fiction, and it's for all ages. And it's 1890 Pennsylvania, and a little boy and his donkey that are abused and take a long journey to safety. And it's got really strong kindness and empathy strands. And that
okay.
comes from work with rescue donkeys. And then second novel is really geared toward young girls, and it's called Mystic Girl. And this modern day little girl who rides horses at her mom's friend's farm is empowered by Odin and Thor and Loki. And that was in response to a little boy telling me girls couldn't play Odin and Thor. And I said, I'll fix that. So that was a combination of my worlds where I'm joining my storytelling and mythology
Okay.
with my writing. And that was a fun write to blend the two different things.
I That actually inspired me. That inspired two more questions. So I'm gonna start with a more recent one. Uh, it's interesting that you're blending Norse mythology. But how did you get drawn into that?
I had already been telling in performance a couple of Norse myths, so I read more of them, looking for great ones to mix in with school groups. Um, you can, it's a really good magnet for boys' attention in a school performance, because the minute you say Odin or Thor, they sit up and pay attention. And so I want them to know that their characters of Marvel are based on this huge tradition of mythology, and that there's so much more that they could read and learn about those stories, and why they've survived for centuries, and how great the stories are in their original form. And without the animation, there's really terrific content. So I already had that in my working repertoire, blending it in with this modern day little girl, and having the gods come down to empower her in turn so she could save them.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, are you familiar with some of the more messed up, not safe for work aspects of the Norse myths?
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of content there that's not kid friendly, and so if I'm performing, I may modify to match that need, or choose some of the little gentler tales from the mythology. Those are other ones are great with an adult audience, and I do quite a few adults. The second piece of that inspiration, I was working on the manuscript when our local mystic seaport, the Museum of America and the Sea,
Yeah.
which is only 40 minutes from where I live, hosted a Viking exhibit, including a working ship, the Draken, that sailed across the Atlantic to be there. It was
Okay.
amazing. And so I spent a lot of time in that exhibit.
Yeah, I have to say that sounds mildly impressive. Going back to your going back to the rest of your bibliography, you said that your first published work was a spooky story, more or less. Do you have any long form spooky fiction? Because I kind of want to tie this more into Halloween. I want to publish this on this video to get out in October. So, do you have anything you think would fit that?
So I've got a couple of ideas of stories that would be a long form spooky, maybe a novel. They're down the road a ways because I've got a lot of projects in the works. I have way more ideas than I have time to commit to them, but I have a list and I just keep picking away at it.
Yeah.
But so the one that's coming out is 13 spooky stories, and there's
Okay.
two in that collection that are in the range of 10,000 words, and some that are considerably shorter. And it just varies depending on the particular story and its setting. But
Okay. We already talked about what inspired you to create, one particular story. That one would be, the one with the little girl who's empowered by the uh, big three of Norse myth. I think it's not inaccurate to call him that. Uh, where do you gather your inspirations for your other stories, or when it comes to your storytelling in general?
so for performance storytelling, um, it's across the board. I keep a really large repertoire because I work with all ages,
Okay.
and just refresh a story if I haven't told it in a while. And of course, COVID really shut that down for a long time, and just getting back to live performance, which is wonderful to have people there in front of me to talk to instead of I just did a very few Zooms. They My books come from very different inspirations. The first one is rescue donkeys that I get to know. I do some public announcing at fairs, and I've met a lot of rescue donkeys, and I've stayed with that circuit doing their shows and announcing for them. And I just wanted more people to love donkeys and rescue them, so I figured I'd write a novel about a donkey and a boy. And Another novel that's in the works for 2023 is about generational transition on farms.
Okay.
And the next one after that will be a Christmas novel. And those are draft finished. One is out with an editor right now. So yeah, and plus 2 picture books in the works.
Well, you've got you've got things going. Good for
Keeping
you.
it going.
Yeah. Okay. We've talked about inspirations, but what I want to know is what I want to know now is how do you flesh them out? What do you look for when it comes to filling out the world uh, or fleshing out a character? So what is it? Well, where do you get your inspiration uh, for how to make the world uh, and the characters to your liking?
So first, I write by the seat of my pants, a pantser. There's not a lot of planning ahead of time. There's a lot of reading and research, just background knowledge. And I often choose maybe a kind of a stereotypical version of a person for, that I want to have a mental image. And then I work from that, and I may add, a different styles and things. As the writing progresses, I can build more on my base image. One character is a little girl that I knew, and but only in my first imaginations of it. And then she grew into very much her own being as I wrote the story. The little boy is sort of a mashup of a bunch of little boys, and the donkey was taken after very much after a donkey that I knew. So finding that kind of character with the setting and things, I want to make sure the reader is engaging all their senses in it. So I want them to feel the emotions. I want them to feel the weather. I want them to understand what it feels like to walk on that dirt road, and how refreshing cool water is when it's blistering hot if you'd laid down and put your head in a river to cool off. So I want to build on that. And a lot of that comes from my performance storytelling, because when you're talking to someone, you see if they're getting it. And so I think I try to transfer that from the oral narrative into my writing and have people having that experience like they're there with you.
Okay. Well, you've already mentioned you've already mentioned that there is this one thing that makes you unique among the people I've interviewed so far, that you actually present your stories to audiences. So I want to know how, not necessarily how it works, because that I can imagine, but is there some moment in particular that stands out to you as that was an amazing fan interaction, or have you or was there ever something akin to a near-death experience in one of those things, in one of those performances?
I've had some really, I call them storytelling miracles or magic. I had a nonverbal child on the autism spectrum
Okay.
talk to me. I don't know why. His teacher stood there with her mouth wide open. Just he was in a totally safe space with me, and we experienced a fire drill during the performance. And he came back and got me to get in line to file out of the school safely. And I was just standing back to let the teacher do her job at escorting the children safely out. And we knew it was a fire drill, not a real fire. So I just let her do her thing, but he wasn't going to leave the storyteller behind. And he came and took my hand and led me out, and then outside spoke to me. It just, I knew what he was and, what his story was, but I was just blown away at that gift of having the stories break through to him and give him that power and that voice that he hadn't been sharing. So I've had a nonverbal 80-something-year-old gentleman in an Alzheimer's unit. who for 2 years had been sitting in his wheelchair holding a harmonica.
Yeah.
And I played mine a little bit. And then I was welcoming more of the elderly into the room as they were being wheeled in the facility. And he shook it at me and said, "Play that thing." And then, so I played, and I went over and I stood right near him and played next to him, and he joined in and played with me. And the nurses were like, "We're going to call his family. We just can't believe it. We've never heard him play." And those kind of walls and barriers that break down like that. And then there's other things, like I was telling a story outside on a town green with the church at one end, and I was at a museum just down the street a little bit. And I got to a part in this story where the church bell chimes and the church bell up the street rang. And at the end of the story, everybody was like, "How did you do that?" And I said, "That was a gift." It absolutely to the second, the right spot.
Okay, I'll
So,
believe you.
yeah, it's really amazing. And there are many of things like those examples that happen in a live performance that you can't ever predict. That's really part of the magic of that.
Okay. Uh, Given that, uh, I assume there is you still have to tailor your stories to a sizable extent, especially given you present them to multiple audiences. I have to ask: do you have anything akin to deleted scenes in your writing, or or in the um, or in your presentation? Something that you want to include, but then decide that it doesn't fit the story or the occasion, so you uh, decide to eliminate it.
So I struggle. Every story has something bad in it. And I struggle with always how to put that into the writing, because you don't know what the reader's trigger might be. And you want to always know that, especially in performance, I'm responsible for that audience. They're there for me and with me. And I don't want to send them home having bad thoughts or being frightened unless they come for that, And so it's really hard to know just how much. And with a live audience, it's pretty easy to see if somebody is just not handling it well. I can back it off. I can change it. A book, you can't ever do that. So once it's out there, it's out there. And I rewrote the scene in How Far Is Safe, where the little boy is abused. I kept it very brief. I really wanted, because it was more about his kindness and his journey and his devotion to caring for that animal and putting his animal first, that I wanted to portray. But he had to have that reason to be on the road. And so that was a really hard scene to write. How much is too much? But it has to be enough to really make people believe he had to go right then. He had no option.
Did
So
I'll let you finish, but first I have to ask: when writing that story, did you have anyone who could critique the story alongside you, or anyone who could give an input, so you didn't have to just guess, okay, this is a bit too much, or this could get a little darker, something like that?
I talked about it a little bit with people. They hadn't read it, and it was pretty much finished before anybody did, in a first draft, way. And then, I think that, again, I fell back on my storytelling experience, and I have had the comment that I handled that scene really well and kept the feelings and everything just enough in check so that people felt the scene and really felt motivated to cheer him on his way. I followed it quickly with a scene of humor, with a couple of funny little things that he was doing, to be sure he wasn't followed.
Okay.
And that kept them, that was like, you build up that tension, you've got to release it. So, and that comes from my performance experience. So I really fall back on that skill heavily in my writing.
Okay, yeah. I have to say that you just said a lot of truth right there. Okay. Next up, the exact. There's an ambulance passing through, because why not?
Barely heard it on this end.
And it's gone. Next
Someone has
question.
a new life story.
Yeah. Next question, the exact opposite of this one. Is there do you have anything that you uh, that you didn't want to include in any given story or any given book, and then uh, and then after going through a draft or a rehearsal, you decided, you know what, I actually could include this this thing, this element, this scene right here.
I struggled a bit with that in the one of these spooky stories is about the last witch hung in Connecticut in the 1600s. And this was before the famous American Salem witch trials. Connecticut had already gone through a whole thing of witch um, terrors, and just anything that you did was wrong. And, you know, they were real people. And I found the witch I wrote about in my genealogy. And I'm not descended from her, but from her husband's second wife.
Oh,
And so close enough, and only 40 minutes ride from where I live. So I've been there to where their house was and the cemetery is. And that witch hunt has left a mark on those families for centuries.
I believe you.
Yeah, they're descendants of witches. And it was really just bullying. And it was fear. I mean, here they were in this primitive forest, you know, with so little protection against so much unknown. So I think a lot of it was fear driven, and then it was magnified in bullying. And so literally you could walk by somebody's field and then the cow gets sick after you walk by. And so you bewitched it and you were hung. And, you know, that's just a crazy thing. And I'm currently working with a group to have the charges of all the Connecticut witches exonerated by the state.
Okay,
So,
sounds interesting.
yeah, just be nice to clear their names. But, you know, it's hard to bring in, you know, people's names those families endure and haven't and carried that burden. But it would be really nice to see them released. And I think writing a story about it helps people be aware of what went on.
Okay. Next, next question. Perhaps somewhat a little connected, but a little more, but also more specific. Is there any part of your writing that you, or of the writing process in general, uh, that you would call your favorite or your least favorite? So if you were to start writing a story, what is it about it that you look forward to the most, and what is it about it that you look forward to the least?
I most look forward to the surprises in the first draft because I write with no plan, just some rough thoughts and ideas in my head. In the book that's coming out next year, the one about family transition or transition on, you know, generational transition on farms, and I live on a many generation farm. The first thing I did was have the farmer die. I was like, wow, that was rough. You know, I had no idea it was coming. I really enjoy the surprises my characters bring to me. I don't always see, you know, where the story's going to go and what's around the bend. So when I'm just as surprised as the characters when we get there. And I love that about it. I like that. Oh, wow, that was pretty clever there, you know, and I don't know where it all comes from.
Yeah.
So I love that about it. I hate editing. Oh my God. How many times can you look at the word form and not see that it's supposed to be from, you know? And and there's, that kind of stuff just makes me crazy, and down to getting proofreaders and extra eyes on it, and then you still, after so many iterations, somebody's going to find something in there. Makes me crazy.
As someone whose profession is somewhat similar to that of a software engineer, let me just say I feel your pain. Like, yeah, misplaced commas, variables that are badly declared. Like this is stuff you do not notice. This is stuff that you go, you know, that you work on for 5 hours, and then you're like, nope, doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? And then you have to go through like hundreds or thousands of lines of code to find that one part that screwed you over.
Yep.
And yeah, it's not fun. But then again, this does beg another question, or at least it pops another question in my head. Um, uh, the there was a this there is this guy called Kishimoto. No, not sure if you've heard about him. He
I've
created
heard them.
okay. He created a manga series that is quite well known. You- And at some point he realized that in an action series, and at one point he realized that the villain of the series was too powerful, and the heroes were incapable of defeating him. So in order to do that, he had to come up with an even more powerful villain who would take him out, but who would have a more obvious vulnerability that the heroes could exploit. So have you ever come across such dead ends when it came to writing?
I, I have a couple of times, and then in one instance, it took like a total turnaround of the story, taking it from a total different tack to bring it where I wanted it to go. And um, it's frustrating to have this, you're going through and you've got pages and pages of text, and then you realize, it's not going to have the right kind of closure, or the story arc is off. You want to have that high action point and then slowly dissolve to your resolution, and it's just not going to work. It hit too early and you're nowhere near, and so something else has got to change. So in a short story, that's an easy fix. In a long story, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. We're going into the publishing questions now. Are you traditionally published or indie published?
Indie published, but I hired a editor and book designer. They come together. The book designer works with him,
Okay.
and that's
They were a
a
package
real
deal.
boon. Yep, yeah, and they work well together. So there's a lot of simple communication, and it's because I want a first quality product out there, and I'm working a full and a part-time job on top of my writing. So something has to give, and letting someone else who can format that book. I've done it myself with that short story, Christmas story. I can do it. It just takes me 10 times longer than it takes somebody who does that all day, every day. So it's actually more efficient if I have someone else do that for me than struggle with it myself, and put so much time into that I could put into writing or editing the next project.
True. Okay. Is that how you always intended to publish them?
I tried with How Far Is Safe for several years to get that manuscript accepted with an agent and or a publishing house that was open to submission. And then COVID hit. And on Twitter one day, I saw a photo image of a pile of mailed in manuscripts in an editor's office. And they had just stopped in to check mail because the offices were shut down due to COVID. The pile was knee deep. And I thought, if my manuscript is in that, nothing's going to happen. And on their computer, the pile is equally as deep, that there are just files upon files, and they're all busy trying to homeschool their children at the same time. I said, it's never going to happen, but I have had more time during COVID to do it myself. And so it was very quick that I made the decision. Now is the time for me to invest my time in getting this book out there. And the impetus of the boy's journey and how far is safe is through central towards eastern Pennsylvania. That's the journey my grandchildren take when they come to visit me. I wanted them to read it in the age group, that they would enjoy that story and that travel and that comparison. So
Yeah.
I said, well, this is the year it's going to happen. And so I just got to work and made it go.
Well, good for you. Congratulations.
Too
Okay.
old to be waiting on everybody's slush piles. I
Yeah.
want to see them done.
Okay. So, how was the experience of self-publishing and traditional publishing as a whole? Did you have any expectations, and were they proven true or false?
So I have to tell you, the first time you hold your first novel in your hands is absolutely amazing and worth all of the work and the sweat and the missing commas and all the things that make you crazy. That having that book out there and then having the first few readers that get back to you, whether they're family or friends or people that were at your book launch, wow, that's just a terrific ride. And I'm so happy that the story hits home with people. I don't think I expected, well, let's put it this way. I knew the work of promotion is harder than writing the stories. And I'm not afraid of hard work, but promoting and selling your book is a tough job and it's a never-ending learning curve. So I'm just always working at that. And so, it's writing it and getting it all pretty and in the box full of them arrive is just the beginning.
Yeah, I've heard a story back in college about marketing, namely that half the money you spend on marketing is completely pointless. But the problem is you don't know which half, so you still have to spend both just to make sure.
Yeah, and I do a lot on my own. I don't have a budget for extra stuff, so I am very careful if I apply for a book award or pay a booth fee to be at a regional, vendor fair or craft fair kind of a thing, that I'm being very savvy with the dollars I'm using. And and I'm building a huge relationship with just terrific people all over the world on social media. And so my plan is to just be that grandma that's out there telling stories in the world. And so not going to let these things get in my way. So if hard work will get me there, I'm digging in and ready for it.
Okay, we already talked a bit about the critical or fan reception of your books. Uh, would you say you were pleased with every aspect of this reaction, or were there any teachable moments, so to say?
I do think you'll never make everybody happy, and everybody has a right to their opinion. And so for the most part, I would say I've had extremely favorable reactions on my books. And one of my favorites was a friend who called me and said he started reading the book. He was on chapter 3. He said, but somewhere between chapter 2 and 3, the voice he was hearing in his head was my voice, because he's been to many of my storytelling events. And so I had no idea that would transfer. And so, and on the negative side, there's, been a few comments, and, I thank people for their input, and I am learning from things and question things a little more in each subsequent manuscript, maybe take an extra step here and there. But that said, the first one's been super well received, and so I know there's going to be some hater some point, and it's all part of it.
Okay. Going a bit from the going uh, uh, from how the audiences perceive the book release process to how you receive the book release process. Uh, would you say that working on getting your book out has changed how you plan to get the other books that you're about to write out?
Yeah, timing is really important. I want to look for a launch time that's not putting too much pressure on me, because I'll put enough on myself, but I don't want it, coming from outside too. I want to give myself the time to do it right, but I also look at the calendar and when is a good time. A Christmas book coming out in May isn't going to make a splash. You got to hit it when there's the first few lights are on in the village, and people are starting to hear that first song or two on the radio in the car, and that's when it's got to be there, ready to be in their hands. And that's a short market space for a holiday story. My book about the boy and the donkey is sort of timeless. I mean, it fits every season. That came out just as COVID was easing off the first time. And I did the launch at a donkey museum that had a big open barn. And we made, one-way directions in their little museum and made it, as COVID safe as we could, with lots of air and spread out, and it worked. And people were so anxious at that point to go to anything and see real people, including myself, that it was a huge success. And so finding the prime time for the audience for that particular book, I think, is part of the trick, and then timing everything to make it fall in line to be ready for that. That's the challenge.
Okay, we're almost done. Just a few more questions. Among them, the one I low-key kind of always look forward the most to, namely, of all the questions I've asked of you so far, is there any you would want to throw back at me? Is there any you want me to answer?
So what draws you to a particular book? What are you looking for in books and authors that you want to follow?
That's that's actually kind of hard to say. I guess what I look forward to most is being impressed, or having my having my mind blown, having my perspective expanded. And you can do that by being very smart, very imaginative, or both. And that sounds somewhat easy to think about, but it's actually uh, uh, quite difficult to do correctly. And there have been times where I was less than impressed with with some of the offerings. I I think I am somewhat notorious uh, for giving books lower ratings than the average. But when I do find something that I treasure and that I really think had a lot of potential or was very well done, then I'll pretty much advocate for that book and for that offer, like on pretty much a ride or die basis. So I will always I will recommend it. I'll try to seek that offer out. I I will I'll like their tweets. I'll even retweet them, and just in general just try to keep the conversation and a sort of relationship going, or I would just in general try to uh, see if there's discourse around it uh, and involve myself in it. Actually, just this day, I'm clearing a few things up right here. I've read the Witcher books a while back ago. I'm not sure if this was before or after the first season. No, it was after the first season came out, but I'm not. The Witcher on Netflix came out, but uh, I'm not sure if I read the series before I saw the first season. Anyway, I read through it. I was absolutely as impressed as you as I describe I expect to be from from books. And ever since I've made and I made a video on every book. I've made a video on the series of books as a whole on my main channel, and then on my second channel I made a whole bunch of videos where I talk about the series. So that's reviews, that's alternative takes, and actually a video of mine that released today as of the time of recording, where I present my alternative casting choices for the for the Witcher series. So yeah, this is what I'm looking for. Something that makes me want to involve myself with the material. Something uh, that sparks my imagination. That sparks my passion. That makes me uh, want to involve myself to some extent, at least, into into the stories that are presented, and make them known uh, as broadly as possible and presented as well as possible.
So you're looking for that story that literally draws you in, and you can already imagine all the responses and the ways that you can further enjoy it.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's pretty cool. So it's to think about your books in reverse and think about them from a fan. What is the fan's expectation? Or the reader? I think that's an important piece that initially as a writer you may not think about because you just have this story to tell. But the more you market your books and you start looking at, who is this particular book good for? And if I was, would I pass this off to this person? And fine tuning your audience, I think it helps the book in a lot. And I wrote the first one for a broad audience on purpose because of the need to see donkeys rescued and loved for who they are. And because every age has the ability to love an animal or to mistreat an animal.
Yeah.
And so I went that way, but it is easier to have a focused audience and write for that specific group or gender or interest area because it makes the rest of your job easier. It's nice to hear a reader's take on it and where it goes for you.
Indeed. And well, now we're pretty much out. But before I close this interview, I want to know: is there any link or platform or account that you want to shout out, or where people can seek you out or find your work?
Sure. The books are on Amazon.com under Carolyn Stearns, and
Okay.
they're How Far is Safe, or Mystic Girl, or Christmas Spirits, and the 13 Spooky Stories that'll be out there in October. If they're looking directly to reach out to me, which will also provide them links to other things, it's Carolyn Stearns Storyteller.com. And Stearns is Stearns.
Okay.
And I'm on social media. I have a ton of Pinterest boards, including boards for all my books.
Okay.
And I'm on Twitter, and that's where we met, and Facebook, but more of the book stuff is Twitter and Instagram. Instagram's building.
Okay. Well, you have Pinterest, so so I could put that up if you're a little too embarrassed about your Instagram.
Yeah, it's still small. And it's more images of my world. And I live in a rural world. I have a rural voice for my writing. And for a long time, I was thinking I had to be something else, but it is who I am and where I'm from. So that's where I write from as well. I live on a huge farm here in Connecticut and have always been involved with animals. So and it comes through in my writing, whether I
Okay.
want it there or not.
Well, what can I say? Uh, I'm glad we had this chat, and thanks for accepting my call back when I issued it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it and love having the chance to talk books with an interested reader and someone with a passion for the world of books and writing.
Okay. And thank you to our audience for paying for paying as much attention to us uh, as we've deserved, to be honest.
Yes,
If
thank
you've
you.
if you've enjoyed this video, then go ahead and like it, and also share it wherever you think other people will like it as well. If you have anything you'd like to add to any part of what was just said in the past 46 minutes, then go ahead and do just that. The comment section awaits your input. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. Ideally, also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. My own book, Heir to the Empire: Next Generation, is available at most major book retailers under a master link in the description down below. Right past my social media and right past Carolyn's link, which I suggest you check out, should you feel so inclined. Until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor, and this has been The Heir's Lair.